I specialize in 115 different fields, being an engineer, background, metallurgy, heat treat specialist, chemist, biotech, medical fields. I understand medical fields. I can look at every part of this building. I'm a master mason, bricklayer, concrete, lay tile, carpeting, 6,000 yards. I hold knowledge of 180 different fibers used in carpeting. Chemistry to put those things together, what your clothes are made out of, cotton, wool, polyester, rayon, all the different combinations of that. Whether it be the coefficient of expansion, allows me the metals, gases, chemicals from all the different parts of the periodic table and how they're used to create different elements. I was the cook for Chemtron electrodes, made super metals, stuff that never was ever heard of before. 1988, I wrote the math interface on all metals. Was called the polymer technology, proving that all metal is plastic, that all glass is plastic, that all plastic is plastic. So my background is very unique. I sleep 3 hours a day. I didn't sleep for 8 years completely. For those that don't know, I died on December 3rd, 1975. I had my right kidney removed. Both of my adrenal glands were surgically removed by a South Korean doctor in an operation. I had gotten sick. My right kidney was killed I was caught in the 1968 riots in Milwaukee. And they kicked my right kidney like you tee a football off 7 times. I got pinned down by 8 boys. After I got out of work, I had arrested one of them for shoplifting. I worked at Sears and Roebuck. I was 18 years old. So his little gang of guys jumped me when I got out of work at 9 o'clock at night, and they tried to kill me. They killed my right kidney. And it took 7 years before it finally knocked me down. Even though it was dead inside me, my body had created a callus around the kidney. It was about the size of my fist, and it was just black tissue. Because of the poison leaking into my system, it created a super immune system fighting this poison on a full-time basis for 7 years. When they removed that, the doctor, who had never operated on a human being before, cut my right adrenal gland out with it because it's attached to the kidney. Then he thought he was supposed to remove my left kidney, which was healthy. So he cut that in half and took out my left adrenal gland and half my left kidney. Well, it left me, I went into anesthesia shock and I was flatlined. I died on the operating table. They couldn't jump start me, and I wound up in a morgue, cut in half with my heart hanging out of my chest for 35 minutes without a heartbeat. I mean, it's in plain view, the coroner and the nurses down there. And then as soon as they signed my death certificate, according to the coroner, they had an exact time and location. So whatever the future event took place, they had a recording of an individual in a morgue at an exact point in time with an exact match, and I was jump-started. My heart started beating, and they rushed me back upstairs, and they put me back together. I woke up 2 hours out of surgery and stayed awake for 8 consecutive years, going to school full-time and working 2 full-time jobs. I walked out of the hospital in 72 hours. Recovery time is 2 weeks for the loss of a kidney, and I walked out in 72 hours. So I got on this kick of studying. I was going to save my own life because I only had half of one kidney, and he said I'd be dead in 3 years. Well, I'm 63 years old now. I was born on September 17th, 1949, and I haven't aged in 35 years. I stopped aging when my kidney. See, what happens is 2 years ago in London, they discovered the gene that causes aging in the human being. When I died when I was 25, my aging genes and my cells died also, and my DNA, according to what the doctors have been able to surmise. So my aging gene, because it's gone, I stopped aging at the age of 25. I've probably aged 5 years in the last 38 years. Now, what's important about all this is that mankind has been throwing stones at each other because of international communication treaties, because miscommunications. But no one ever went to war over the math problem. Now, how many of you know about the object in Greenland? A couple of you, okay. Well, for those of you that don't know, There is a spacecraft that has melted out of the ice in Greenland. As you know, the North Pole has melted completely. You can go from London to Moscow or to Russia by going over the North Pole now. All the ice cap is gone. The last place that has ice on it was Greenland. Greenland had a 18,000-foot ice cap on it. Well, the spacecraft that is anchored in the center of Greenland created the last ice age 50,000 years ago. It's a weather machine. It's 55 miles wide, 300 miles long, and 2 miles high. The people that lived in it were called the Mois. If you draw a straight line from the spacecraft to the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., through the Yucatan Peninsula Great Pyramid at Mitsubishi, it ends up on Easter Island where the Mois have been dug out of this dirt. The heads on Easter Island, well, 2 years ago they finally went ahead and they excavated, and they're all 65 to 85 foot people, full body carvings. And these were the people that lived in the spacecraft that was uncovered that's melting out of the ice in Greenland. So when you think we've been alone, these people have been up there for 50,000 years. The spacecraft is still active after 50,000 years. It has a 200-mile dampening field where no electrons can flow into it. In 1947, a B-52 bomber flew into that pattern, into the dampening field, when trying to fly between Maine and London. As a result of that, they lost power and crashed in Greenland. As they sent in rescue B-52 bombers to rescue them, they hit that same dampening field, but they veered off. They just ricocheted off of it. And by testing, trying to get to these guys, they were able to bring a circumference and find out that there was an object 200 miles to the center of this field. On the southwest corner of Greenland, there is a small community. It's the only community on the island of Greenland. That community is a military post, CIA, that uses a compressed air generator to operate diesel engines to run a Caterpillar to run back and forth to 200 miles from the base to the object in Greenland. A lot of our technology comes from the reverse engineering out of the spacecraft. It is still functional and is still in operation. So it's pretty important what this thing is. All the nations worldwide are up there with the United Nations, and they're all working together. The point is that we're not alone out here in this universe. The reason I bring this up is, if no one ever went to war over a math problem amongst humans, don't you think it would also be logical that we wouldn't go to war with E.T. when he shows up? And if E.T. does show up, what are we going to do? Babble? Start a war between another planet because of miscommunications? No, we need a communication base that is so mathematically certified, both frontwards and backwards, that when we say something, it means exactly what we say, so that there is no subjective interpretation, translation. So it's very important for us to be correct 100% of the time when we're dealing with ET. Otherwise, they're going to throw a rock at us like they did 375 million years ago at the Yucatan Peninsula and get rid of the dinosaurs, which you all know about. So we don't want to have rocks thrown at us. So the planet, all the governments of the planet are looking at this math interface as being a correct way to communicate, stop wars on planet Earth, as well as communicate with ET when they show up. And as many of you who do the research and get on the internet know that there's probably a lot of different ETs already influencing this planet with all of our little toys that we have, our cell phones and computers and TVs. Yeah. So now if you add thorium to lithium, you can get 8 times more power out of the same size battery. Think of an ordinary car battery made out of lithium thorium that would have the power to drive a car 400 miles with a 4-minute recharge. That's all. Now, that's technology. I know battery technology. I built my first perpetual motion motor when I was 16 years old, my first laser beam when I was 12. I've been on the cutting edge of weird, futuristic stuff ever since I was a little kid. And if you do enough research on them, you're going to find out that I was taken when I was 8 years old. I went into a UFO for 3.5 hours. They put a machine on top of my head. And whatever they did to me, they put all this information into my head. And why I've been able to build this program without any interruptions from anybody for the last 32 years. And I fielded over 100,000 questions at seminars. And I haven't missed any. So you cook up the best question you can think of, and I'll tell you the facts. I'll tell you the facts going all the way back 8,500 years and how it's going to influence all the cross-referencing with it. Authority. Authentic. Authorization. And what's the symbol for gold on the periodic table? AU. He who holds the gold makes the rules, has the authority. Ever wonder why gold was the key? Why it was AU and not something else? Because gold is spelled G-O-L-D, not AU, but AU is authority. And throughout history, gold has been the medium, going all the way back to the beginning. About 8,500 years ago, they decided that gold, because of its beauty and both its ability to withstand tarnishment, would be used as a standard metal on this planet. It's also an industrial metal because gold is a molecule that you can make a 128 gigabyte circuit board on a 20 nano chip. And a single atom of gold can be a transistor, a capacitor, a diode, based on its configuration and where it appears in the circuit board. They would build a circuit board against that wall with 128 gigabytes of information on it, and then photocopy it onto a 20 nano chip, and then grow that in a cloud chamber of argon, and that's how they would build those chips. So that's how technology, and then he's just stack them together. Everything's done with laser welding, electron beam welding, because the computers are unique. They build themselves now. A 1/4 inch green 1/4 inch quartz crystal run by 2 green holographic lasers are an 800 gigabyte processor with a 64 terabyte memory capacity. The speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. Information is recorded inside a quartz crystal. Our human brain is a 500 terabyte capacitor. That's what you're rated for, 500 terabytes. And these little puppies are only 1/4 inch, and they have thousands of 1 full square inch, which are 64 times 64, which would be 3,600 trillion capacity per crystal. And they have thousands of these banks of information run on green holographic lasers. Computers are building computers today. They have advanced, we've had artificial intelligence to make determinations about what a lawsuit is and how it's run at the United States Supreme Court for 12 years now. About 2000s when they implemented the artificial intelligence to make decisions. And when the computer figures out that we're the virus, enough said about that. I syntaxed the Constitution of the United States of America, wrote a new Constitution for the United Nations. And now the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence is going to be auctioned this year in Washington, D.C., because it's a historical document and has no value. Benjamin Franklin was a triple agent, French attorney working for the English crown to capture the United States and give it back to England, which he was successful in doing through adverb verb. When I did a seminar in Atlanta, Georgia, for 72 people, we had the senator from Georgia. He came to the seminar along with several Supreme Court judges from Georgia. I said to him, you guys had a civil war down here. And Grant went ahead and he and Lee got together and you guys signed a a surrender treaty here. I says, a syntax that's written in adverb verb, doesn't say anything. I says, the southern states are as independent as of a Confederate agency as the North is. I says, you guys were never conquered by war. This is Title 28, Section 1359 is collusion. You had a gun to your head to sign a contract. The contract was written in adverb verb. Both people had a second grade reading level. You don't have a contract. You know what happened the next day? The Confederate flag was raised above the Capitol in Atlanta, Georgia. Made all the newspapers around the world. And all the southern states put up the Confederate flag on top of the Capitol buildings. Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana. Everybody's going like, what's going on? It says, you can't surrender to a gun in your face. When the Constitution of the United States ended on November 2nd, 1859, the United States of America did not exist. The South was an independent country. They created the Articles of Confederation. Article was a pronoun, of was an adverb, making confederation a verb. That was a lie. So they don't exist either. It's an illusion. So their illusion versus the United States of America, of is an adverb, making America a verb. Illusion. How does two illusions create a fact? They don't. So therefore, everybody's still independent. Yeah, Microsoft took Bill Gates back in 1995 when I went public. Anybody using prepositional phrases, even writing a single legal sentence from my book on the internet would kill your computer. And for about 18 months, they were frying computers left and right. But there was so few people back in 1995. It was only in a few hundred people that were actually involved. And then so I went to Seattle, Washington. I met with Bill Gates, and I said, listen, you got 47 million people on your website, and your contract for Microsoft is a complete adverb verb lie. Feeling lucky today under Title 15, Section 1692E, under false and misleading statements for a $25 million fine per person. Put the antivirus in there and take it out. So a couple days later, no more problems. So then computers upgraded, right? People that had the old computers, and I've got a couple of the old ones from 1995, where the antivirus never went in. It's still trapped in the hard drive. If you plug it into a new computer, it'll kill it. It'll actually start on fire. I'm serious. And some of the old computer hackers go, that can't happen. So they fried up two computers going, we ain't going to take our new one and cook it. But there's a few of the old dinosaurs still laying around with that old virus, that old secret virus laying in it. But nobody uses 95 computers anymore. I got the old 86 processor yet, someplace in my basement. I was there at ground zero as that thing came over the top of the Kennedy Space Center and blew up right on top of me. To be there at the only one of 50 space shuttle launches to see that one. I was there 4 times to see 4 successful launches, but I got to see that one blow up. You know, it's a rare. I've been in a lot of rare positions. I was in Hurricane Camille, Biloxi, Mississippi, when it took out Camille and Biloxi Air Force Base, and Keesler Air Force Base. I was at ground zero on a body cleanup in 1969, in August. There's a lot of unique things I've been exposed to. Been in tornadoes. Been picked up, had my car picked up in a tornado, survived that. The man in front of me died. His car got flipped over and blew up. He was destroyed. Just 80 miles an hour, that much, to travel 15 feet. He died, I didn't, because he was 15 feet in front of me. The amount of things, why you're here, why you're supposed to be here, all the split-second things that happen in your life, but the snap of a finger. I was 18 years old. I'm standing up against a tree. I'm playing with a 20-gauge shotgun shell while rabbit hunting. And I bend over to pick up. I dropped the shell. And as I bent over to pick it up, a 30-30 slug split the back of my jacket open. Did I drop that pen, or was it knocked out of my hand? And I bent over to pick it up just as the slug split through my jacket. And I still have the bullet hole in the back of my, middle of my back. A scar formed years later. And it's quite prevalent. It's about 1 inch in diameter, about a 1/4 inch deep, where the bullet went through me. But why am I still here doing this? Is because I'm supposed to be. And if they are successful in assassinating me, they just go back and reset the clock and jump and fix it. Because this math interface on communications will stop wars and guarantee that planet Earth does have a future, not only with our own people, our own races, our own tribes, or with ET when he shows up. Because eventually we're going to evolve. We're out there in space. We're broadcasting. You don't think those signals don't go out? And somebody's going to be listening someplace and show up here? You know, do the math. We're a young planet. We're a young species amongst the billions of years that this world's been around. The proof of that is in the spacecraft up in Greenland, that they've been here 50,000 years ago. And those guys were 65 to 85 feet tall. They had dinosaurs. The world was big way back when. Now everything is small. Question?
Yeah, you talked a couple times about ETs. What exactly are they, or what's the purpose?
ET can be many of anything. It means extraterrestrial, which means not of this world. And, you know, there's been millions of sightings worldwide of spacecrafts, right? Even a couple weeks ago, opening night of the Olympics. Anybody watch that on TV? In London, they had the fireworks went off above the stadium, and that's a no-fly zone because of security. And there was a UFO above the stadium, about 50, 60 feet in diameter, because everything went up in so many different spectrums of light. It was cloaked, had a cloaking device, but because of the amount of light frequencies from the explosives of all the different fireworks, chemical light, it illuminated the spacecraft above the stadium. And it was on YouTube, and over 200 different countries videotaped it. And they tried to play it down as being a balloon in the air. There was no balloons up there. There was no blimps. There was no aircrafts. But ET was up there watching. I say that I do this at all the seminars. Small craft would not have power to travel between point A and point B because of the universe, how big it is. In other words, our closest star is 4 light years away, Orion. Because an object no bigger than this room wouldn't have a fuel supply capable of doing something like that. So my take on this is that these are time machines from Earth, from our own future, because they're only visible for a split second. And the same craft has been videotaped and photographed millions of times over the last 70 years all over the planet, identical to the one above the stadium.
So are those pictures still on YouTube?
No, every one of them on the internet has been taken down. Nobody's got it. There was a few sites that were up there, but the government's been chopping them off left and right. Anything with the... If you type in... but people do have copies, and they're putting them up as fast as they tear them down. So if you type in UFO over Olympics opening day, it'll pull up a whole bunch of different sites and see pictures of it. My surmise is that these are time machines that come back in time to view or stop events that would destroy the planet. Some crazy guy setting off a dirty bomb, for instance. They run the video backwards and find out who's responsible, come back in time to remove this individual. Inasmuch as mom and dad never met. Instead of turning right at the corner, he turned left and never met his mate. Therefore, the individual was never created. The crime never took place. It's something as simple as that. Being able to fix the time-space continuum, because, you know, in the Cold War, from World War II until present day, they built 88,000 nuclear bombs. They didn't detonate any of them because of what happened. everybody knows Oppenheimer, the guy who developed the atomic bomb, World War II, in Area 51. His brother died 2 years ago. On his deathbed, he gave the GPS location of 2 B-2 bombers in Germany that had flown through the Philadelphia experiment at the time it took place in 1944. The window was opened, and the 2 B-2 bombers flew through that window in 2007 or 2008 it was, and they flew back in time and landed in Germany in 1945. And they built this hangar, and they had this hangar completely covered over with dirt, 20 feet of dirt, with these 2 B-2 bombers with 4 nuclear bombs in there, but they didn't have fuel for them. Otherwise, they could have flown those bombers into New York City from Germany. On his deathbed, he gave the GPS the location of those 2, and they were dug up. That was up on YouTube, that they had recovered these 2 bombers that had flown back in time and verified that the window is still open on the Philadelphia experiment. Here's the state of Montana. Here's where the Freemen were held up. Here's Billings, Montana, and I was right here in Cat Creek. Now, when I showed up in Billings, I got off the plane, and a gentleman met me, and he says, "Come on, we're going over to my ranch." Well, I had corresponded with this man several times. When I got to the ranch, there was about 20 guys with shotguns. And he said, "You're going to stay here and write a lawsuit at gunpoint, and you're going to write this lawsuit to get these guys out of trouble up here." Well, it took 5 days to put together the lawsuit to do it. Then I went on the radio to do a radio show in Billings, Montana about parsing syntax grammar and how the fraud works. The FBI, 5 minutes after we started broadcasting, blew up all 4 radio stations in Billings, Montana. So we called another radio station 200 miles away, and we sent out the broadcast and went out on Republican Christian radio worldwide as to what was going on. 38 miles south of the compound, there is a limestone quarry, 125 feet deep. Some of the other free thinkers, I guess you could call them, freemen, witnessed 2 105 howitzer cannons being moved at night down the country road very quietly. And they set up 2 120 millimeter cannons in the quarry. They then evacuated everybody within 5 miles away of the quarry because they would hear the blast of the cannons when they were fired. The idea was to shoot a shell 20 miles up in the air under a full moon and have it fall down on top of the compound, blowing a hole in the ground 100 feet wide and 50 feet deep, saying they had explosives and blew themselves up, hence solving the problem. In 1820, the area, now Lewis and Clark showed up here in 1834 on the Yellowstone with Sashagowean. In 1820, an Indian treaty was cut up here with the French. The farm of the Freemen had never been ceded into the United States of America, was a whole in the United States of America under Indian treaty. And this was purchased land. When everything got conquered, the Treaty of 1820 was overlooked. So the Freemen were sitting on sovereign territory, not part of the United States of America, outside the jurisdiction. It was a whole in America. That's why the FBI came from Puerto Rico. 100 agents were deputized, not of the United States citizenship, and surrounded the compound, but couldn't go in. They couldn't trespass onto a foreign country because they didn't have a permit to be there. These are some of the secrets that you people don't know about, and as a federal judge, I have classified information about all this because I handled lawsuits for all this stuff. When it was exposed that the cannons were here, it was my job then to get word to the Freemen. The senator from Denver, Colorado shows up, and he took 9 of my cassette tapes in about grammar and gave it to the Freemen. After playing the tapes, they said they realized that their whole entire position and the way they were thinking was a lie. They realized that their treaty, even though they were sovereign within this little hole in the world, was also a lie because the treaty was written in adverb verb and didn't mean anything. And they were also told about the 2 howitzers, that if you don't walk out before dark, you're not going to walk out anywhere. We're going to put a hole in the ground here. So they surrendered. Now the senator, when he went there from Colorado, we had a button microphone on him. Looks just like a regular button on a suit, but it was actually a nickel-sized transmitter with a 300-foot range on it, tied to another mic to a recorder, spy, like a spy camera. And we have him on tape in his voice stating that, I don't care about these people, I'm just here for the show. He says, I'm here to make sure that they all get blowed up. But the military, as far as these things go, oh, by the way, the senator from Colorado, I missed my plane. I got bumped to another plane in the emergency road. I sat right next to the same senator. I had the tape recording in my hand of what he said in secret to the FBI about killing the Freeman. And we played it on the radio worldwide. When he landed in Denver, Colorado, he was kicked out of the Senate. And I played it for him on the tape. And we had the worst turbulence of the 1,400 flights I've been on in the last 17 years. It was the worst turbulence I had ever been exposed to on a plane. And he got up in this turbulence and got out of and changed seats to sit someplace else because he knew who I was and what I was doing and what my position was of getting the Freeman to surrender. And when I played him his own voice back, committing treason against the people to kill American citizens, he couldn't stand to face me and got up and left. But we also played it for the population on Denver radio, and he was kicked out of office when he got back to Denver. What are the odds of me being placed in that location at that exact point in time to do all those things? Here's another one for you. I'm in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I missed my plane. I wound up on a 747 in row 47, back of the plane, flying it was a nonstop flight from Honolulu to Chicago, Illinois. Lady sitting next to me is a school teacher, and her daughter is sitting next to her. She's 18 years old. She's complaining, I'm tired of moving. I'm tired of changing schools all the time. Can't we ever stay in one place? Like, says, all my friends live in Honolulu. I'm going, sounds like you get around a lot. He says, yes, my husband's in the military, and so we have to move all the time. I says, what's your husband's name? Helm. Admiral Helm, the Helm Pacific Fleet Task Force aircraft carrier, Harvey Helm. And this is the wife of the admiral who's just been assigned to the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington, D.C. 3 days earlier. And she was going there to join him and enroll her daughter in a Florida school for girls. And she's an English teacher. Well, Mrs. Helm also has a son in the Navy, assigned to the Palestine-Israeli conflict in Europe. And he's over in Europe right now, and this is when Palestine and Israel were shooting at each other. Things were really heated up. Well, Admiral Helm was being transferred from the Pacific Fleet, from the Helm Task Force, to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What is she doing sitting in row 47 on the back of a 747 with me as a federal judge? Well, the man in front of us is Secret Service, not realizing that Mrs. Helm, we're this far away, speaking quite loud, and he hears this. All of a sudden, like, he collapses and says, oh, I'm having a heart attack. So the stewardess clear off the row directly behind us of 5 seats and relocate the passengers in other rows. The captain gets on the PA system and says, ladies and gentlemen, we needed heart surgeons. Are there any heart surgeons on board? 400 people on board the plane. Well, they had 3 heart surgeons on board. So they all came back to the row, and they're all standing there looking at this guy, and he's complaining of having a heart attack. The captain comes back and he goes like, what are you men doing? He's having a heart attack. Service him. He says, we don't have a contract. He says, you don't seem to understand. I'm the captain of an airship in international space. I am the chief cook and bottle washer of this place. You guys will service him or be locked in the brig. So the one doctor goes over and kneels down and takes his blood pressure and pulse, 110/70, pulse 72. Sound like anybody with a heart attack? Sound like a pretty healthy man to me. He pulls his guy down. I'm looking through the seats, and he whispers something to him. He perks up, and he goes running all the way back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to stop in Los Angeles, and there's a medical emergency, and drop this man off. So we land at the end of the runway in Los Angeles. The whole entire plane is surrounded by black SUVs. 7 guys in black uniforms with no markings on come on board. 5 take the immediate seats behind us as the other 2 guys carry this guy off the plane, and we proceed to Chicago. Who were they? They were military Secret Service to guard Harvey Helm's wife, Joint Chiefs of Staff. Somebody screwed up big time. The point is, I had 8 hours to teach her Parse syntax grammar, to write the Palestine-Israeli Treaty, which I worked with her on, using the United Nations treaties that I had written for the international trade agreements, to give to her. And who does Mrs. Helm sleep with? Yeah. Joint Chiefs of Staff, Harvey Helm. So therefore, she was able to educate him to go to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and settle the Israeli dispute on Parse syntax grammar fraud, because they were arguing an adverb verb. Now that they had a position of a treaty in quantum language, 72 hours later, you heard that the Palestine-Israeli treaty was signed, and it's been peace ever since. I can tell you a few other little nasty little things that are happening. Here's planet Earth. Here's North Korea. 2 years ago, they detonated 2 atomic bombs, right? Those that did their homework? Okay, these things went off. It was 5 days apart. 140 miles off of Chile. They had a 9.5, biggest earthquake recorded in the history of keeping earthquakes. What they did is they set up a shock wave with the first one, which traveled through the earth, hit this line here, and then went like this, and through the magma created a 9.5 in Chile. That was a bump. The second one popped it. Okay, when it popped the Chile one, that was on the Ring of Fire for the Pacific Ocean. The shock wave then comes back off of this thing as it's ricocheting back over, takes out Christchurch, South Island of New Zealand, then causes a volcano 18,000 feet under the water, bigger than Krakatoa, to explode, creating a 6-foot tsunami. That was all. Nobody died in that because it was 3 miles underwater. This is on the Ring of Fire. And then when the shock wave comes all the way back up and focuses, he hits the trench outside of Japan, creating a 9 on the Richter scale, creating the tsunami, which then took out 3 nukes on the coast, which are dumping 11,000 tons of plutonium radioactive water, 2 million times more potent than it takes to kill a person, into the Pacific Ocean now since the tsunami took place, to keep the cores from going China syndrome. They still haven't got that thing under control. It's still burning out of control. And they pump 11,000 tons of radioactive plutonium water on this thing every day. This isn't made public to the public. There's very little of this is public. Satellite photos in, I think it was April, showed that they're drilling a hole 27,000 feet deep. The first nuke put a crack in the earth. The second nuke was they were able to use the second atomic bomb to identify magma, shock wave through magma. They can target through a shape charge any country on the planet with a shape charge through magma. There's a no-fly zone over North Korea, so their Air Force is useless. But the magma, they can go anywhere on the planet through magma. This was an experiment in a country, Chile, which is totally... Okay, when Chile got hit, Chile was raised 15 feet as the Pacific plate slid underneath Chile. When the magma came back, it raised the Asian plate 15 feet, including the island of Japan was raised 15 feet as the Pacific plate flattened out and moved underneath. And Hawaii, which is dead center in the middle, dropped 1 foot. Hawaii has a 40,000 cubic mile magma pool underneath it, which created and Volcano National Park cracked a hole 1 mile across and created a 1,000-foot wide pool of lava that rose up 8,600 feet from the base through the mountain. It then blew out a vent 60 feet in diameter at 8 miles per hour, moving magma into the south end of the island, pouring it out into the ocean, creating what's called VOG, V-O-G, volcanic fog, which is silicosis, fibers into the air. It's really, really, really agitating to your lungs when you inhale this stuff. I was there 2 weeks ago and I got a lungful of it. I was sick for 3 days. I was only 20 minutes in the fog. I was driving along and I got some in my lungs and made me sick. Anyways, the island dropped 1 whole foot. And this is all recorded on oscilloscopes that measure magma shock waves. Huh?
All the Hawaiian islands dropped?
Yeah, the entire middle of the plate dropped, but it cracked open the volcano. And the VOG got really bad after that. Okay, they're drilling the second hole now, and they got a hydrogen bomb going into it. This is 100 times bigger than the atomic bombs. They found that as a result, they found a fissure in the crust of the Earth in North Korea. And they're drilling a hole down in this fissure. They detonate a hydrogen bomb, and now we have a new math problem that shows up. Here's the 43rd parallel, North Korea. 43rd parallel, San Francisco. 43rd parallel, London. If they do a shape charge, and then from the top, it looks like this. Here's the North Pole. Here's San Francisco, and here's London, and London, and here's North Korea with a K. 120-degree angles. Liars figure, but figures don't lie. And on the 43rd, as a shape charge, they can bounce the magma at 120-degree angles and hit the San Andreas. Guess what happens when you hit the San Andreas fault? You got Mount Rainier, which is 40 years past due from its standard 40-year or 38-year eruption. You got Hood, York, and Shasta, all in a straight line, right on the Pacific. You can take Seattle and Portland and write them off. No place to go. The cloud from the 4 volcanoes would be devastating. San Francisco, that would be, you could write that one off. A tsunami would take out Hawaii from San Francisco in a 9.5 or bigger. It would take out Honolulu, which is at sea level, like 1 foot above sea level. And the shape charge going through the magma would hit the gates in London and flood London, taking out the subway systems. And then that would create a tsunami which would hit New York City, which is 4 feet above sea level, and take out New York City, Manhattan Island. And if they miss and they hit Yellowstone, then you got a super volcano 40 miles by 60 miles going off, taking out 2/3 of the United States. All one big dust cloud. So I did this presentation for 2 3-star generals and 1 2-star general for the Russian military, for the Chinese military 6 weeks ago. The one general got sick. They had to take him to the hospital as soon as I got done with this. Somebody knew something. Now there's a side effect, and that's the secondary shock wave. Secondary shock wave takes out Hong Kong with 100 million people. And a lot of this stuff came to me on emails in just glitches, like somebody working at the NASA center that runs the Hubble telescope sends me a picture of 3 spacecrafts coming this way, and then it's deleted a few seconds later. And then I run the math problems on it and all the rest of the information. You know, anybody remember when Obama took the podium the first day he went to the Joint Chiefs of Staff? He walked up and says, I didn't make this mess. There's only one president at a time, and I'm not it yet. And walked away. And that was it. Everybody's expecting some great speech. Fact is, he got a bloody nose. He got told about all kinds of things that are not included in the presidential election. What they say and what's going to happen behind closed doors about what's happening with this math interface and how it's affecting the planet. What ET is doing and how it's affecting the planet. All the different terrorist threats and how it's affecting the planet. All the UFO sightings, as well as the timeline, time travelers keeping order. Why we're still all here. Why this is allowed to move forward with no interference on a global basis. And when I'm talking a global basis, I mean 150 language translations for my website to be as big as it is, uncontrolled, and with the order that is being conducted from it has been very architecturally designed so it doesn't scare people. And those that need to know, need to know. Those who don't know have no power to make an influence on it. It's only the world leaders that are in a position of needing to know things that are going to be told what is correct. The people, as long as you got your 6-pack of beer, your 600-channel TV, and your Ruffles potato chips, you don't care where the tank parks as long as it doesn't bump the satellite dish. And that's mankind's reality.
What are they doing with the HARP program up in Alaska?
High Amplification Array Radiation Pulse. HARP is a alpha-beta transmitter. There are 12 units around the planet. They can reach down as far as the equator. They are used to control the frequency of your brain through radio wave influence. It's used to take you from an alpha, which is aggressive, to a beta wave, which is docile. It gets 98 degrees Fahrenheit in a populated city like Los Angeles, and people tend to get crazy at 98 degrees. So they change you change your mind to a beta wave and make you all nice and comfortable at 98 degrees, not irritated. Mob control, that's all it is. Now, if you want to talk about angels don't play this harp, of the satellite 38,000 miles out over the Pacific Ocean, which can't be seen by any earthbound station that controls a microwave to increase the temperature of the surface a half a degree and create weather patterns 3,800 miles across to move El Niños and weather patterns, that was started in 1988. It ran until 1997 when I had it shut off. But they fooled around with it long enough to almost cause a 9.9 earthquake on the San Andreas when they heated up the North American plate 22 degrees and the Pacific plate 25 degrees. I did a seminar in Sacramento and told them, you will turn the temperature down of the United States from 85 in Milwaukee to 25 below zero, and from 85 in Houston, Texas to below freezing. You will hold it there for 22 days. You would take the air, which is blowing from the west to the east over the Yucatan Peninsula, and move it at 50 miles an hour for 22 days from the east to the west and push El Nino offshore. 24 hours later, the wind blew at 50 miles an hour from the east to the west, and the entire United States of America was put into a deep freeze. And it lasted for exactly 22 days where it was below freezing, bringing the North American plate down enough that it pulled the pressure off of the San Andreas. We didn't have an earthquake, and El Nino was pushed offshore. Remember when all the seals and the marine life were dying because the water was up in the high 70s? Went back down to 55 degrees where it's supposed to be. Because when you move hot water this way, cold water replaces it from the bottom, 3 miles down. Sometimes I got to interfere with the world to save the world, even though I'm not supposed to. Now, how about World Trade Center? Everybody watched this on TV 100 times. Heard all the stories and all the rumors, but you never know what really happened. Because have a nuclear physicist background along with a heat treat specialist, coefficient of expansion, and metallurgy, we have a building that's 1,300 feet tall. Now let's throw an anvil that weighs 500 pounds off the top of the building. How long do you think it's going to take to hit the ground, hit the sidewalk? 12.8 seconds. 12.8 seconds. How long did it take for the World Trade Center to fall down? Anybody know that? 4.8 seconds. And that's compressing all that concrete and steel. What does that say? That says somebody changed gravity, didn't they? Even if the thing was burning out of control, floor by floor by floor, it'd probably take 2 weeks to melt down to the basement. But to accelerate gravity at 3 times its normal speed? Now, I put this presentation on national television in 11 states for an hour with the blessings from physics professors and demolition experts from mining all over the United States. When they saw the presentation privately, they then said, put this on national television because this is the rest of the story that people don't know about. Now, when you core detonate the World Trade Center with C4, now in 1988, I told you I wrote the mathematical procedures to prove that all steel is plastic. Okay, there's a little thing called an iron molecule. And being that I'm a metallurgist, here is a cube. In the center of a cube, below 1650 degrees, you have one nuclei. It's called an iron molecule. When you heat that above 1650 degrees, it becomes what's known as a face center cube molecule, and now you have 6 nuclei. Iron is the only substance in nature that can change its identity. Once it becomes a 6 face-centered cube nuclei, this is now plastic. Red steel. Cherry red steel. Just like plastic. Tie it in knots, beat it with a hammer, make swords out of it. Anything you want. Heat glass at 2200 degrees and it's liquid. Pour it in anything you want, cool it off, you got glass. Take plastic at room temperature, tie it in knots, you got your plastic bottles, nice and flexible, doesn't break. Cool. Concrete. For that concrete block, it's liquid with lime, heated to 1780 degrees. As it cures, 22 minutes later, it turns into plastic. And the chemical reaction becomes epoxy resin. And then in a little less than probably 20 minutes, it turns from epoxy into concrete, and it goes into a center cube, making hard brick. So concrete, steel, and glass are all plastic. They all have a coefficient of expansion of 6.3. Anybody want to guess what the coefficient of your plastic soda water bottle is there? 6.3. That means that anything that's plastic will be affected by C4, plastic explosives. So you core detonate the building with C4 plastic, or thermite, which is a 6.3 also. When it detonates, it creates a bubble, 1,300 feet in diameter. When C4 detonates, it creates a shock wave of 85,000, roughly 85,000 pounds per square inch pressure. All of you that watched the video, this is a 400-foot wide building. The debris field is 850 feet wide above the building when it's still in a static position. Watch the video. The building is standing there and you've got a debris field 550 feet beyond the 400-foot center line. So it's 850 feet in a half second. That's 1,600 feet per second. That's a good acceleration equal to a bullet, or equivalent to a C4 detonation. Every building within a half a mile of the World Trade Center had its windows exploded out at that exact second. And what's the one thing you saw in the air? Instantly, when the building was still, when this was going on, what was completely surrounding the building? Paper. Paper was airborne instantly all over the building. How did all that paper get 1,000 feet away from the building in 1 second? Where did it come from? Well, at the exact second of the core detonation of the World Trade Center, what you were looking at was not a concrete, steel, and glass building. What you were looking at was smoke. Not molecules of concrete, steel, and glass, but atoms of concrete, steel, and glass. Paper is not affected by a 6.3 detonation. Only concrete, steel, and glass turn into smoke. And so you've got a static pile here of smoke. Now, has anyone ever seen the hydrogen bomb explosion on Discovery or National Geographic's? And you see little balls. Those balls are called plasma. Plasma is the same thing that causes sunspots on the sun. When a C4 detonation takes place, you have plasma balls that are formed throughout the building. These are electromagnetic eddies that are created. Anything within a plasma ball will not be affected by the 6.3 coefficient of expansion of a C4 detonation, which only affects concrete, steel, and glass. So at this exact second, when this building is exposed to this, you have all these heavy chunks of steel in here, but they're also subject to the change in the gravity well. The gravity well collapses in 4.8 seconds, pulling the entire debris field right into a real nice pile in the basement. One thing that they didn't tell you was there was 8 buildings, 40 stories tall, that surround the World Trade Center that all fell down that were caught inside the electromagnetic bubble. They weren't on fire, but they all collapsed just the same with the World Trade Center because they were inside the electromagnetic pulse of the C4 detonation. So plastic affected plastic and pulled this whole thing down into a nice, neat pile. Now, if you look at the video, you'll see that here's Long Island, here's the World Trade Center, and here's a big white cloud of asbestos. The entire World Trade Center is insulated with asbestos. 50,000 people a day work in the World Trade Center. 50,000 people for 30 years exposed to asbestos insulation. Anybody want to guess at what the lawsuits would be worth over a 30-year period? In the trillions of dollars against the United States government. Who owns the World Trade Center? New York City Port Authorities. Who owns the New York City Port Authorities? United States Department of Transportation. Who is owned by the United States Postal Service? Who owns the Treasury? Who owns the Pentagon? Who owns the military? Jeez, it's all kind of coming back to roast on the Treasury, on the post office, isn't it? So now you've got this big cloud of asbestos, and 3 million New Yorkers are exposed to raw asbestos that's just been blasted away into real nice fine particles by 85,000 pound per square inch blast wave. Coefficient of expansion of asbestos is not 6.3. It's only blown into a free atmosphere, not into an atom format. So therefore, this here becomes a death trap for everyone exposed. Now, 50,000 people a day work, but only 3,850 people were in the building because everybody was told to stay home. Both planes, when you run the video back and you look at them, did not have windows. They were drones. Where did all the people go that supposedly left Boston? Never heard from again. Out into the Atlantic and ditched. And this was a controlled issue by drones. And we have drone technology. There's over 12,000 drones in Iraq right now. So these things, liars figure. But this little number here, figures don't lie. And being a heat treat specialist with a nuclear background can tell you that this was created by 186 men of special forces who deal with demolition. The basement of the World Trade Center was blasted out. What do you think's below the World Trade Center? Heavy rails called the subway system. They blew the basement floors out and dumped all the gold onto the subway rails, and they disappeared. Not to be found yet. Somewhere. That was the World Bank of the United States, controlled by the United States Postal Service. But the gold, that was only $3.4 billion. At the exact point of detonation, $12 trillion was transferred through Honolulu, Hawaii substation into Singapore Bank in Singapore, world's largest bank, which can accept a deposit. How much money does it cost to conduct a war in Afghanistan and Iraq? $500 billion a year. There's a 22-year supply of money to keep the war going in the Middle East and keep us in Asia.